Now, when discussing modulators in Ableton Live, I think the best place to start is using the Max for Live LFO. There's actually two different flavors of LFO. There is an audio device and a MIDI device, and we'll look at the audio device first. Now, just to make sure, if you have an Ableton Live suite, more than likely you already have this installed, but just to be sure, you can go to the Ableton website, which I actually have pulled up here, and the LFO audio and MIDI device are both part of a collection called Max for Live Essentials. All you have to do is go to the Ableton website, go to the packs area, and if you don't see it listed when you scroll down, make sure that you're looking in the Max for Live area of the Ableton Live packs. Once you download and install Max for Live Essentials, you will have a number of different devices. Many of them are described below. So now we can start to work with the Max for Live LFO. As I mentioned, it is a Max for Live device, so I go to this part of my browser, and I want to go into Max Audio Effect. We'll expand this, and I will scroll down until I find the LFO device. Now, what I think I'd like to do is utilize this to do something I mentioned before, to modulate something, let's say in the analog instrument, that the LFO that's here can't actually access. Maybe, as I mentioned, we can modulate the unison detune parameter. That'll make this sound much more thick as it plays, and that can be a fun little way to add some character to our sound. So I see here's an LFO device. I will drag and drop it. It's an audio device, so it goes after our instrument, and here it is. So as I mentioned, an LFO is a low frequency oscillator. This generates a waveform that cycles a certain number of times per second, and we can map this so that it will modulate or change the value of a certain parameter. Now, let's listen to what we're working with first before the modulation is applied so we understand what we're changing. I'm on track 5. My analog instrument is here. I've created a very simple little riff, and let's play the clip and hear what it sounds like before the LFO. Let me open up the filter frequency a little bit here, just so it's a bit brighter. All right. Now what I'm thinking could be interesting, I'm going to enable unison here just by pressing this button. I'll play this again, and as I play it, I will start to adjust the detune parameter here. And you're going to notice that the sound will sound a bit wider. It'll have more of kind of a chorusy effect. It should be pretty pronounced and rather obvious. So let's play this. Okay, so you can hear the effect of that. Now, what I'd like to do is use the LFO device to modulate this parameter. All I have to do now is hit this map button, and now I can press any parameter on any device anywhere in my project, and the LFO will modulate it. I will now click the detune parameter here. We can see that this is now grayed out. When I hover my mouse over it, there's an orange bar at the bottom, letting me know that this parameter is disabled because it's controlled by a Max device. Now, we can see that this parameter is going all the way to the minimum value, which is 0, up to the maximum value, which in this case is 100. This range is a bit too much for me. So I want to minimize the range, and I might want to change the speed here. If I want to do those things, I have to control all that in the Max for Live device. Let's play this really quickly just to get an idea of how this sounds. It's actually kind of cool, but like I said, I want to minimize the range here. If I want to minimize the range so it's not going the full 100% range from minimum to maximum, I can do that by adjusting the depth parameter here. One very nice thing about utilizing this LFO device is that when we make changes here, we can see the changes applied visually, which gives us a better idea of what's going to happen as we map this to different parameters. So here, we've minimized the minimum and maximum by reducing the depth. That's good. Now let's say if I want to focus more on the lower values, all right? Maybe I don't want this to go in between 25 and 75. Maybe I want it to go from 0 to 50. Well, if I want to do that, I have to use the offset knob here. We can see this line in the center of the LFO. This basically represents the midpoint, and I want the LFO to not go above and below the midpoint. I want it to basically stay below this line. I can use the offset parameter to do just that. Let's give this a negative value. And there we go. So we can see now, as the sine wave is hitting the minimum value, we see it gets flat here. All right, I don't necessarily want to make that too flat. So let's go up to right about 50%. And that achieves essentially what I wanted. One last thing here is I'd like to make sure that this is going to play in sync with my tempo so that this is rhythmically sensible. If I want to do that, I can change the rate here. Right now, this is in a free sync mode, which means that this is not going to sync to my tempo. I can simply click this note, and now my rate has changed to a note value. This represents 1 bar. Let's change this maybe to a half note. And as I play this, all right, we can see that that's increasing and decreasing in sync with the tempo. One last thing to point out is that this LFO device can be mapped not to just one parameter. If we click this box here, there's actually 8 different destinations that we can map this to. And then you can adjust the minimum and maximum value for each destination so they all operate a little bit differently. So as you can see, the LFO device is very powerful and really flexible. There's a lot of different ways we can use this to add character. And now we have some modulation on a parameter that the LFO in the analog instrument couldn't access.